That is a sorry sight, isn't it? Hey there, welcome back to Farmcraft. We're getting back to work on this track adjuster job. No, I said that wrong. We're finishing this track adjuster job. I never thought when I pulled these tracks apart that it was going to be this long to get them back together. I'm going to go ahead and make a stand and say I am not putting another video out until this is done. I've had it. And it's all going to be in one video. I'm putting the springs back in, I'm doing all the seal work on the grease cylinders, we're putting the idlers back in, and we're putting the tracks all back together. One way or another, it's going to happen. Let's quit yakking and get to work. So the first thing I want to do is get these springs back in. This is the one that compressed all the way. This is the one that didn't. So I'm going to put that one on the left side. For whatever reason, left is associated with sinister in Latin. The spring that's not as good is going to be on the left side. And if the left side's throwing tracks, it's probably because of this. Let me get the Mini. We're going to rig this thing up and get it put back where it's going. So obviously I'll just chain it to the bucket and carry it over. But I was worried that chain was going to get wedged in between the spring. So I decided I'd use a strap. This is an old strap, but this thing only weighs like 300 pounds. It'll be fine. Don't worry, this spring's only got like 20,000 pounds of compression. The other one's like 50. Oops. So I got a piece of old climbing rope. This stuff has a breaking strength of like 3,000 pounds, so it will not break again. I know you probably don't believe me right now, but really, it's not going to break. Kind of like kicking the barrel of a loaded gun. That's it. So what are the chances that I'll never have that spring out of there again? Because this one's more compressed, there's no chance of the chain links getting wedged in the spring, so I'll just use chain for this one. That'll do. Now we need some idler wheels, and to do that we need to finish up these grease cylinders. You may recall the first track adjuster that I removed, I already cleaned out and honed the bore and ordered replacement seals for it. I haven't done anything with the other side since pulling it out. I'm probably going to have to hone this cylinder too. Alright, so I want to check the state of this track adjuster, but I realized I lied to you guys, telling you how heavy this thing was. I thought this was a big piece of cast steel. I thought those were fillets, but somebody pointed out, and they're right, that is welded. So this thing's hollow. That's plate steel. There's another plate on the other side, and then this center thing. I don't know how thick the plate is. It's still very heavy, but it's not solid. Just getting this grease zerk back out. Wow, that thing's really stuck. Got about 120 psi there. Surface area of that, I mean, that's at least 10 square inches. That would be 1,200 pounds, really? Maybe it's not quite that much, but still. It was many hundreds of pounds and it's not moving. So I'm gonna do a little grease, and I must say I'm a little concerned. This thing being so stuck that it won't go in, it won't go out, makes me worry that something in that bore is jammed between the piston and the bore. And that doesn't bode well. Doesn't seem to be straining that. So let's see if it'll now move with some air. That was really surprising. Nothing. That thing's so jammed up. Am I gonna have to pump that much grease to get it out of there? All right, I got a little adapter to go from a Schrader valve to, this turns out to be an M8 1 1/4. So now I can just use a tire inflator. It seems to be working. Not a good sign at all. I'm using my big grease pump here. So at least I'm not going through tubes. So I measured the other one. It's 8 inches to the seals. So the seals are right there. I don't see any carnage on the piston, so that's good. Well, that could have been a lot worse. So I'm not seeing any metal bits or anything. If I don't see any evidence of contamination, I can actually just put this grease back in the bucket and pump it again into something else. I might bring that back to the store and tell them it went bad. I feel pieces of seal in here. Sorry, seals, it is what it is. So overall, the news is good. I mean, you can see the seal is all chewed up. I'm surprised that thing even pressurized. Probably the little bits of stuff that I was pulling out of there had been kind of in position on that and are no longer. Inside the bore, kind of the same story as the other side. No deep gouges or anything, but it definitely needs to be honed. But I think it'll hone up just fine. So yeah, overall good news. We'll hone this side too. I wipe it out frequently, and I'm using a combination of diesel fuel and WD-40 for honing oil. The honing oil lubricates, but it also carries away all the debris from the stones and what you're taking off of the bore. So I'm frequently adding quite a bit of oil and wiping it out, but I don't show all of that because frankly this is pretty boring. sunshine, rain, and lots of hail. Got it all cleaned up and looking good. You can still see some black in there. That's mostly just staining. You can't feel it. I think that'll work just fine. I also got out the bore gauge, which is set for 100 millimeters. But of course my dial indicator measures in thousandths of an inch. So let me just summarize. Basically, it came out to about just under 101 millimeters as a bore diameter, very similar to the other side. This one obviously still has somewhat of a seal on it. That didn't take much. Looks like that was a urethane seal. So the interesting thing about these is that this piston really only contacts the wiper. And I got a little nick there. And another one there. The wiper is not a real critical part of this because this isn't a cycling cylinder that's going in and out constantly. It goes out and stays there for years. I think what I'm going to do is that any rough spots, I'm just going to buff them up with some Scotch-Brite, and that might need a little more than Scotch-Brite. Basically, I don't want anything like that that's going to come out and hurt the wiper. Somebody had a pipe wrench on that. I didn't do it. Yeah, this one's definitely in worse shape. This one has a couple little pits and stuff on it, but it's nothing rough. So I'm not doing anything to that one. There you can probably see, that's the worst area. That's the next worst, and it really isn't bad. You can see that line right there. The wiper may never actually reach that point, but I'm still going to clean it up with a flap disc. Pretty good. Another spot right there. This one I'm just going to use some Scotch-Brite on. Okay, so I've got two wipers, one for each side of course, and those are going to go like this. I'm wondering how this is going to fit because the wiper has to go over the seal. Like I will install the wiper into the housing, but these seals, well, we'll see. These are custom made seals, which means there's a little bit of anxiety on whether or not they will work. This is basically a U seal. So this goes towards the pressure forces this against the wall. So that's going to be on there like that, which hopefully won't be too hard to get on. And then it has a split backup ring that's going to go right there because all the pressure is coming from this side. So the backup ring is backing this up so that it can't get extruded through the gap. And I may have to heat this thing up to get it on. Oh no, that's going. Alright. So now, with that thing sticking out like that, am I going to be able to get it through this wiper? See what I mean? But that's the seal installed. It's that simple. So if this isn't making any sense, this is going to go into the bore, into the grease cylinder like this, and the wiper will be on the bore. So if I install the wiper first, like you typically do, this wiper is going to be sitting here like this, and I need to get this inside of it. And I'm just not sure that's going to happen. Alright, so this is the old wiper. I can use a little more force and not worry about messing it up. Obviously I don't want to mess up the seal, but I'm wondering will I be able to do like that to get that in there? It is kind of looking that way. Yeah. But this old wiper has significant wear on it. The newer ones are much tighter than this. The other option is to have the wiper on there already, and then I have to tap it in with this in place, which sounds like it would be a bad idea. And the third option would be to install this before I put in the wiper, but then the wiper needs to go over that. So I would have to put that on the lathe, machine it down, because that flares out where it's been pushing for years and years on that plate. I don't want to do any of that. I think this will work, so I'm going to let's go install one of the new wipers in one of our grease cylinders and see if this will go in. So this wiper has a pretty thin wall, and I think I'm going to mess it up if I just go trying to tap it in. So to be on the safe side, yeah, I need something like let's see, what is that? 4.150 to 4.3. So let's turn something on the lathe so that I can install that without screwing it up. I got 2 of them to do. I want 4.150. I'm starting at 4.06. So it's like 90 thou I'm taking off. .25, so 25 more. Yeah, if I leave it like that, I won't be able to drive it all the way to the shoulder that it's supposed to sit against. So we're going to take this outside down to 4.3. Right now we're at 4.5. So that will now push on the metal ring around the wiper and nowhere else. You may recall from a couple videos ago when I honed out this cylinder, this was the first idler wheel that I took off. And it's been sitting out here the whole time. I just sprayed it with WD-40 and covered it with that bag, and it looks fine. Yeah, that's good to go. Now, the wiper. I've got a little dent there. That's nice. Something hit that pretty hard and dented that in. But this isn't a sealing surface, so really I can just dent it back out. Maybe. A lot better than it was. Well, don't do that. All right, it's actually fairly stable like it is now. So we'll just leave it like that. It's a rare thing that I can get a big seal to go in straight right off the bat, but it wasn't bad. It started out a little crooked, and I would just start tapping on that side and straighten it out. All right. Looks pretty good. There are pits and things in there. I would really like to have a coat of grease on that, but of course the seal is going to wipe most of the grease off, if not all of it. I'm going to go ahead and grease in the bore, however much stays is what it is. And then I'm also going to grease this guy as I'm putting it in. And then the wiper is going to take a bunch of it off. I mean, I don't know what else to do. It would be nice to have some grease in there so that it's not getting water into it. When water condenses, it's not right on the metal. It's not going to hurt. It may not help. I don't know. Let's do it anyway. So now the question is, can I get the seals to go by this wiper? And I'm using the pick. I didn't have the best camera angle here, but I'm doing exactly what I showed you when I was kind of preparing for this. Using the pick between the seal and the wiper just to get the two to go together. And I got it all down to the last little bit, which of course was the hardest part, but it wasn't really that bad. Got it. And from here it took a little bit of force just to get the seal to really go up into the bore. There it is. Let me go ahead and grease the rest of this thing. One thing I should mention is when I was trying to let the grease out to take the tension off the track, release the shmoo, or not. Not a speck of grease coming out of that thing. I removed the grease zerk, which is up under there, or at least it was. It's out right now. And the grease did not come out. Now most of these grease cylinders I'm used to have a check valve on them. And rather than just removing the little zerk, there's actually a bigger nut that you partially unscrew, and then there's a hole in it that allows the grease to come out. It turns out there is a check valve in this thing. If I put a punch up in there, there's a spring. And as I push this thing in a little bit, it will build up air pressure, and then I can let it out there. But I don't see any nut on this thing or any way to overcome this check valve. We'll take a closer look at this later. Maybe I'm supposed to take this out to let the grease out, but that is really jacked up. Yeah, maybe I could get a Allen wrench on that. So let's do this. If I push it in that far, you should hear when I hear that. So I'm going to hold that up and push. All right, that's about as far as I want that to go. Now we can do the other side. It went okay. A little bit challenging to get it in, but I've seen worse. Don't feel any dents in that one. It's pretty snug though. A little bit of rust on it. Alrighty. There's always the worry, you know, this is a custom made seal. It's not what originally came with the machine. Is it going to work? Now that I've seen these go in, and I mean, that's a nice seal. I'm very confident this is going to work just fine. That makes this whole process a lot more enjoyable. As long as I'm not wrong. Now hopefully you'll be able to see what I'm doing with the pick, but basically I'm pushing this in at the same time I'm pulling that out. Kind of like putting a tire on a rim. And by the way, this pick is very dull. It's not a... It's nice to have a not sharp pick sometimes. There it is, I think. There it is. Whew. I'm trying to let air pressure out, but nothing comes out. Huh. I think I'm up against a bunch of air pressure, but the check valve is not letting it out. And there is no other nut inside there. So I think the only way to let it out is to take that off. I think what is going on is there's some grease in the way. Yeah, see, the grease is slowly coming out, but there's not enough air pressure. So think about it, you know, if I push on that with 100 pounds, well, that's probably, good grief, that thing's 4 inches across. It's like 12 square inches, so the PSI is very low. It's just not that much pressure in there to push that grease out. So I think everything's fine. I think the seal is creating air pressure. Let's see if I can take this side off. It'll be interesting just to see what happens. Oh, come right out. There's the air pressure. Yeah, it had me nervous that maybe it wasn't sealing, which obviously would be a problem, but it's sealing fine. There you have it. So a fair amount of grease ended up out here, but a lot of it went in because that just wasn't nearly as much grease as I put on there. So I'm happy with that. I think that went together very well. And tomorrow those idlers are going back on the machine. It's about time. All right, I've got this thing picked up with a hoist so I can actually get to the grease zerk. And yeah, there's no nut there. It's just a grease zerk. But down in there, and there is a check valve there. Down in there, there's a ball right there. I don't know if you guys can see that. I don't understand how they put this together. Does that whole thing come out? Yeah, let's do this. I'm going to put the grease zerk back in so I don't fill it full of dirt. And I'm going to get out the needle scaler and we're going to clean this thing up so I can really see what's going on. I'm spending so much time on this because once you put the grease in, you need a way to get the grease out if you ever want to detension the track to work on it in the future. So I need to figure this out. Still like concrete down in there. I bet you that whole thing unscrews. All right, so here's the deal. This used to be a nut that screws in and the check valve is in that. And looking at that thing, it looks horrible. I really don't want to mess with that. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I can grease through that and I can let the grease out through that. Both of those are easily accessible when this is installed in the machine. So I think the thing to do is to leave that alone. Except for one thing, there used to be some protection there for that grease zerk, so I'm going to see if maybe I can tack a piece of pipe over it, just so something doesn't come up and snap it off. Well, it's ugly, but it does protect the grease zerk. And let's make sure this still goes on there fine. Yep. It'd be nice to have a nice continuous weld all the way around, but I don't want to mess up that check valve. If it ain't broke, keep fixing it until it is. Let's not do that. So one thing I want to do is try to get as much air out of this as I can. I think the best way is going to be to pump grease in until it comes out of this. Yeah, let me get my air grease pump instead of wasting all of this. I'll just have to fill the tube back up. All right, this is my big air powered grease gun. Pumps out of a 5-gallon bucket. I'm calling that good. So that's ready to go back on the machine. was easy. Okay, off to a good start on number 2. This one you can see the nut now. It's this whole outer collar. I didn't realize that. So that's a hex that could theoretically be turned, but I don't need to because I've already turned that. And I'm going to take that off again and pump grease through it. So yeah, I don't have anything else to do on this one. I'm going to leave that just like it is. Let me get this off of here. So like an idiot, I tightened this thing with my impact wrench. It was on the lowest setting, but obviously I overdid it. Be sure I had already unscrewed this. And now I've stripped it. Well, that ain't no good. So it's moving a little bit. This plug was in really bad shape when I took it out the first time. I think I kind of got lucky, and now it's so stripped, I'm really struggling with it. Alright, this thing's pretty jacked up. Not only is the hex stripped, but this was an O-ring, and it had a groove to ride in there, and that has just all been totally demolished. What I would like to do, I think, is weld a nut onto it, and then hopefully I can weld that up without damaging this, and see if I can't put this on the lathe and make somewhat of a groove for another O-ring. I think I can fix it. Just need a way to turn it, which that nut will accomplish. Clean it up a little bit with this carbide burr. I took a piece of scrap 3/4 inch copper pipe and I had to split it, but now that acts as a very good shield for the threads while I'm welding that up. I need more diameter back on it so that I can make a good place for an O-ring. The nut is not straight with the threads, and I figured that was going to happen, so I'm going to fix that in my collet block here. And now that I've got it grabbed by the threads, that is going to center that on the threads. So by eyeball, I think this is the lowest side of the hex, and I'm just advancing slowly until I cut all of it. And there, the whole thing cleaned up. So now I can rotate it to the next side. But it turns out this side didn't clean up, so I have to advance further, and then I'm going to have to go back and cut that other side again. So it's symmetric. And now when I cut all the other sides, I should have a symmetric nut at the end. So let's see if that fits any of my sockets. Well, wouldn't you know it, 3/4 won't go on, and that's the same as 19, it also won't go on. And the next size up is definitely too floppy. None of my sets have 20. A 20 millimeter would probably fit great, but I don't have one. So I'm going to turn it down more so that a 3/4 will work. A 19 would also work. I need to take another 38, 19 per side. That'll work. Alright, I'm kind of wishing I had filled that all the way in with weld, but at this point I don't care. We're going to roll on. how do I get in there and cut a groove? Because I don't really have the right tool for that. But that's sort of my standard operating procedure, working with the wrong tools. That could work. Need to go deeper. It actually doesn't look too bad. I might go and get that corner. I can still see some of the copper from where I welded. I'm calling it good. There, it looks perfect. Well, you don't think so? That's a little better. Alright, so you can see it's not perfect, but come on. A lot better than it was. So I've got some metric O-rings here. That looks about right. I think that'll compress in there just fine. No O-ring squeezing out or anything. O-ring still looks fine. Alright, let's get some grease in there and we'll pump until it shoots it and hits us in the face. Just about. Yeah, I think that's it. If I saw that laying in the yard, I would not be doing this. I don't want that rusting out, so I'm going to spray that with some fluid film. She's in. Alright, so for putting these tracks back together, I'm just going to clean up the rust on these pins. Not a lot. I don't want to make them loose or anything. I've got kind of like a Scotch-Brite type wheel on a grinder that should be good for this. Now this where it's all mushroomed out, I may go ahead and put that on a lathe and turn it down so that it'll at least go all the way in. Because as it is, there's no way to get past that point. This is the worn area. This wears whenever it's twisting, so this is a different diameter than it is out here. So this was the best thing to indicate off of. And you can see I'm wobbling here, I'm wobbling even more here, but this is relatively stable. I don't know, that might be seriously work hardened. That doesn't seem to be cutting much at all. Tell you what, I'm going to take this out and go to the belt grinder real quick and then throw it back in. Or maybe just do it on the belt grinder, because I think that's been work hardened. It's not cutting well at all. Yeah, let's do that. Quit torturing my poor little lathe. Yeah, I should have done that from the beginning. Yeah, so it needs to go in like that. It's definitely not going to go in easy. I'll try smacking it in with a hammer. If that's not going, we'll press it in. And I'm working on stuff like this. I'm always aware in the back of my mind that if this bucket slips, that's going to start to fall and this chain is hooked to that. So I'm ready to get the heck out of the way if anything were to happen like that. I start cranking this thing down only to realize that I quickly over tighten it and have to let off some. Well, already lined up. I was a little confused at first. It's because the spring is more compressed than it was by 4 inches. So I don't have to get this track nearly as tight to line it back up. If I could just hold that still, I think I could pound it in. That's a big if. So the pin press obviously could finish that off real quick. It's going to be a half an hour of work setting it all up and pushing it in and then disassembling it all. I'm going for quick. Going. That was a little faster than the pin press. So it's got to be in deeper than it was because I drove it all the way to the edge. Remember, all that stuff was mushroomed before. This is what it looked like when I started on it. Well, it's a rainy, drizzly day, but I don't want to stop, so we're doing it this way. Did you notice what I did? I didn't put those in. And I have to admit, I did the same thing on my D3, and I left them out because that pin was way too much trouble getting it out. But I now have a pin press, and I'd kind of like to push that in just a touch further. So I'm going to get the pin press out. We'll push it out. We'll put these in, and then we're going to push it back in a little further. Yeah, so in this instance, I should be able to use this 20-ton jack. Yeah, a strap to hold that jack in place is necessary. Thankfully, I got lucky and the jack wasn't damaged. There. Now we can put it back together. Making more force than I expected it would. Might have to go get the 50-tonner. There it is. It moved, but it doesn't take long before I'm pushing this jack to its limit again. In a second here, you can actually hear the pressure relief valve. Man. Hear the pressure relief on the jack. That's 20 tons. That's crazy. All right, let's go get the big boy. Well, it's in. I can tell you there's more force on that than there was on that spring, but I think we're good. Yeah, went below the surface. I like it. This one has a little notch on it right beside the master pin. One down, one to go. All right, I'm gonna try to do this side better. I think if I chain this right, I'm gonna be able to control directly where that goes and get it almost in position just with the bucket. Budget. So that actually did work pretty well. I can control where that link goes, but now the bucket's in the way of getting a wrap of chain around it to come along it together and remove the bucket. So I've got a chain through it and a come along here, which hopefully is going to be enough for me to line that pin up. So this side was actually more difficult. Remember, this is the side with the longer spring, and that means I have 2 inches less to work with. I have to get these tracks pretty tight to make this line up. So here I'm putting boards underneath to get the slack out of the track and pulling it as close as I can get it. Sure is close. Yeah, it started. All right.
A few moments later.
Oh, good Lord. Almost. Okay, we can now put the pin in, maybe. All right, I don't think that's coming out anytime soon. It's actually back together. Wow, that's weird. All right, I need to tension the tracks and then we're going to take this thing for a test drive, but I'm going to have to do that tomorrow. It's back together. I was beginning to wonder if that would ever happen. All right, let's get some tension in this track. This is the side with the spring that didn't compress all the way. So what I'm going to do is tension it just until that spring starts to move and then stop and see where I am. So I'm just going to be putting the grease gun on that guy and we'll pump it up. I should have brought that grease pump into the shop last night. That cold grease pumps pretty slow, but it still didn't take that long, actually. So let me show you what we got here. Spring just started to move. It's moved like 1/16 of an inch away from that square. Let's see if I can show you. See that? That's how much it moved. I want to stop there because when I let it down, it's going to then put some slack in the system. When I measured this before, it relaxed about 1/2 inch when I lay the track on the ground. So all the tension that's on it now, or a lot of the tension, is coming from supporting the weight of that track. See, that thing is up off the ground. And I am measuring 16 3/4. What I was shooting for was 16, but the upper limit of spec I think is 18.5. So I'm well within spec. So I'm going to leave it there. That way I'm not putting undue wear on this track. And as long as I'm not throwing tracks, I'm calling it good. If I do start throwing this track, I can either tighten it further and let it wear, because the spring will always be pushing on it, or I have to pull the spring and fix it. I suspect this is going to be fine. I'm within spec. How's that track going to come off? I don't think it will. Now the other side is going to be different. Because that spring is shorter, you can see the adjusting cylinder only came out a couple inches. On the other side, it's going to be 2 additional inches, which is fine. That's also well within its ability. What I'm going to do before I go to the other side, though, is start this thing up and run this track around in circles and make sure that it stays the same as far as the spec, because, you know, some of these links might be a little bit frozen, and if I get them all moving, it could potentially change the tension a little bit. Yeah, that definitely made a difference. I need to put more grease in it. More like 16.5 that time, so good. That side's done. Let's flip this thing around and look at the other side. I thought about running the track around like it is, just to loosen everything up, but it's so loose because that spring's more compressed. I don't want to risk throwing it. That would really be obnoxious. It's actually at quite an angle right now, so there is a force that way. If it walked off that idler, that would give me a lot of work to do for very little return. So I wanted to point out how much deeper the sag is on this side, and that's all because of that spring. There's an extra 2 inches of compression in the idler wheel, and that equates to 2 inches on top and 2 inches on the bottom because it's a circle. It's not really a circle, but you get what I mean. It goes all the way around. If I remember right, previously I was getting like 21 inches, and now I'm getting 30. So there's an extra 9 inches of sag. Of course, when I originally did this, the springs weren't compressed at all. So what you're seeing there is 4 inches of compression of the spring. Anyway, let's grease this thing up. Yeah, I'm right on 16. Let's run the track around and see if it stays that way. It's crazy that grease pump just picked that ridiculously heavy track up that much. So this side came out to just under 16 inches, which is a little interesting. I'm not sure why it would have tightened up from running it around, but it's still well within spec. 16 was right in the middle of the range, so 15.5 or 15 3/4 is fine. So, wow, I can actually say it. The tracks are tensioned and everything is correct. And there you can see how the cylinder came out a good, what is that? That might even be 5 inches. Everything's holding grease. Everything's looking the way it should. This job is done. Goodness gracious. This was one of those jobs that was going to be, oh, well, we'll just pop these tracks apart, pull out the grease cylinders and put in new seals, and you're done. And instead, it was a bear getting the tracks apart. The grease cylinders needed to be honed. I had to get custom seals. I had to fix the pre-tensioning rods on the springs and come up with a pin press and all this other stuff. It just turned into a massive undertaking. Sounds so simple, but it ended up being different. All right, the track's good, no funny sounds. It used to have a lot of clunking because those tracks were too loose, and that definitely is fixed. I am really happy about that. All right, do you want the good news or the bad news? So the bad news is I'm going to take a break from large Marge. I have a couple other things to work on, and sometimes you just need to take a break from a machine. I have been working on this thing forever. I'm itching to work on something different. Here's some good news though. I think a lot of you guys will be excited by this. When I finally get everything fixed to where there's no like mechanical problems left, I am going to do a start to finish fixing video of taking a scrap excavator and bringing it back to life. I'm going to take out all the details of the repair so that this will be, like an hour-long video. And we're going to go through what everything cost, and I'll try to estimate how long things take. Maybe, I don't know, that's very tough to do. I actually don't know myself at this point how much money I put into it, and I'd kind of like to see that number. I bought this thing for $7,700. What is it worth right now as it sits? I don't know. You tell me in the comments. I'd be curious to see what you guys think. I mean, it runs like a top. The undercarriage now is actually in great shape. The track pads aren't worn out. The chain's not worn out. The tensioners work. What's left to do on it is actually fairly minor things at this point. So it's a pretty functional machine with a good engine. We're definitely getting there. And so you guys can look out for that video coming in the future. I think that's going to be a good one. As for now, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.